Spectre Vision Radio.
Welcome to Earth, a Love Story, coming to you from Spectre Vision Radio. I'm your host, Robin Lassiter, and on this episode of the podcast, I'm exploring psi abilities and Siddhis. From party tricks to special powers, how do we develop them? What is our responsibility when using them? And what is the danger of using them without examining our own shadows and ethical structures? Is it even possible to develop them without turning towards our sacred interiority? I recently drove from North Carolina to Wisconsin and back, a total of about 2,000 miles. This is not an uncommon occurrence in my life. I'd love to say it's a simple fear of flying that leads me to take my 2008 Toyota Tacoma on these epic road trips. And I'd love to say that because I know I can get over my fear of flying, but I suspect it's something else. You can listen to my podcast episode, The Final Death of the Small Self, to hear about why I think part of my soul makeup is to follow grid lines back and forth across the country, retracing invisible lines while some unknown, energetic, vibratory wiggling takes place that I'm both a part of and is none of my business. Who knows? It's all made up, a good and functional and weird and fun story I tell myself, and I'm also not attached to that story. I just know I'm supposed to keep my belly close to the earth, and for this hermit in human design, this Cancer sun who'd rather be tucked away in a dome in a valley somewhere, I sure move around a lot. Regardless, me and my truck, Denny, named after the mountain pony from the man from Snowy River, if you know, you know, have traversed nearly 170,000 miles together, mostly solo. It gives me time to think and wonder and wander, and still, after all those miles, I love a road trip. And on this recent road trip, I listened to a few podcast episodes. When I first started my experiencer journey and discovered the world of ufology, I listened to podcasts with a fury. I was obsessed. I couldn't get enough, particularly of hearing firsthand extraordinary or spiritually transformative accounts, along with NHI or craft encounters, near-death experiences. I know you get it. I'd finally found people who were talking about my life, my experiences. That obsessive and intensive listening began in 2019 and went on for several years. These days, I don't listen to many, which is ironic because that world has never been more alive with information, theories, accounts, speculation, and factual reporting. As tends to happen once some level of integration occurs, and this doesn't just apply here, but in many areas, I became sort of allergic to the whole disclosure, ufology, paranormal, and anomalous landscape. But just when you think you're out, the phenomenon pulls you back in. So here I am once again, and here we are. I still don't listen to much these days, but when I do dip in, it seems like the episodes come at just the right moment, with just the right context. And that's what happened on this road trip. I listened to Jordan Jozak and Jesse Michaels talk about the GATE program on Jesse's podcast, American Alchemy. I listened to Rich Archer and Keith Parker talk about a new understanding of the human energy field on Buddha at the Gas Pump. Both highly recommended podcasts and both linked in the show notes. Somewhere in there, something went click. I'm always asking, how do we start with UFOs and end up feeling our feelings? How does an anomalous or extraordinary experience lead, for some, into an ongoing spiritual and psychological journey with no stones left unturned? How are shadow work and parts work and seeing a UFO or having contact with NHI related? This episode is about the relationship between psi abilities, which could also be called siddhis, the Sanskrit word that refers to special psychic or supernatural abilities gained through deep meditation and spiritual discipline, and the inner worlds and work that can grant us access to those abilities. About why doing that inner work seems interwoven and important to these experiences, and what the implications of cultivating psi abilities and siddhis are for the experiencer community and for our world at large. Through many different teachers and teachings, including my training in Vajrayana Buddhism, I've come to see the anomalous and extraordinary realms of a strata of reality which remains largely hidden until it's not. It's a strata we sometimes find ourselves thrust into when, for example, an 8-foot-tall mantid appears next to the bed and blasts light into your brain, and then everything goes black. Just me? This is a strata we can stumble into through the use of entheogens, through trauma or ecstatic spiritual experience, or find ourselves in when a loved one passes and we can suddenly speak to the dead. It's a strata of reality that may appear out of seemingly nowhere in our lives, and suddenly there are shadow beings, precognitive dreams, and out-of-body experiences. We might see orbs and UFOs blinking in and out of existence, Bigfoot or other cryptids. The person next to us might not see anything at all. We might have a mystical experience and be able to read everyone's mind for 3 weeks. Maybe there's a near-death experience, and suddenly we can see auras and speak to trees. Or maybe an entire culture that has been at a certain stage of development and experience, one that rejects anything outside of rational materialism, begins to see, en masse, lights in the sky. The material and the subtle start to overlap, and we are individually and collectively thrown into a tizzy. Spiritual traditions across cultures acknowledge this strata of reality and have instructions for what to do about it. Across the board, we are warned against getting caught up in this realm, warned against thinking we've achieved something or that there is some meaningful realization that comes with seeing into this dimension of reality. Zen is famously blunt about what to do, not if, but when an angel or a demon appears in front of you. The instruction is to ignore them completely and return to practice. Seeing into the other worlds is considered a distraction. Sufi mystics call supernatural gifts veils that obscure the heart's journey. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, siddhis are considered natural byproducts of practice. But Patanjali explicitly states siddhis are, quote, perfections to the outward turned mind, but obstacles to samadhi. Meaning we think we're getting somewhere, but be careful. These powers can distract us from the real goal, which is total union with our true nature. Some traditions claim the spontaneous arrival of siddhis and psi abilities and supernatural gifts and experiences come from the karma of a previous life. In this life, they can be developed through lots of inner work and discipline. None of these traditions say these realms and powers don't exist. Many experiencers can attest. Extraordinary abilities and experiences are real and documented and a natural part of our human experience. But again and again, they come with a warning. Just because we can see through the veil, have beings or NHI or craft push through that veil into this reality, and just because we may develop psi abilities or siddhis, doesn't mean we've reached a state of enlightenment or attainment. At best, we can be distracted. At worst, we can be destabilized, ontologically shocked, or our own shadows can be amplified through unexamined egoic structure, causing harm to ourselves and others. I particularly like Shinzen Young's middle path philosophy on the subject. From his book, The Science of Enlightenment, Shinzen calls this strata the realm of powers, and says, when journeying from surface to source, some people encounter celestial and empowering experiences in the Sambhogakaya. It may seem to them as though they are meeting angels, visiting the worlds of the gods, or achieving psychic or healing powers. It may seem to them that they can remember former lives or travel outside the body. Shinzen also talks about a period of time in his own journey where he saw, with his eyeballs, very large, 6-foot-tall insects walking around. Sound familiar? He stays agnostic about their ontological status and advises the really important question is how to harness these phenomena toward optimal growth. To do that, he says, we need to become somewhat indifferent to what they mean, but utterly fascinated by how they move. He notes that there are multiple ways to relate to this realm of power, including freaking out, been there, diversion, becoming endlessly distracted by the realm and falling into spiritual materialism, been there, or the plumb line approach, which takes the advice of many Zen traditions to meet the phenomenon with total equanimity, treating an angel appearing in front of you the same as you would treat nothing appearing in front of you. Shinzen concludes by landing on another option, which he calls the compromise scenario. He sees the journey toward enlightenment, toward source, as a burrowing downward from the surface, and eventually we inevitably come across the realm of powers. Between diversion, getting lost in that realm and taking it all literally, and continuing straight to the source, is the option to take an oblique path, to angle through the realm of powers while continuing the journey towards source and enlightenment. He says, the range of oblique angles between pure power tripping and pure purification represents the spectrum of classic shamanism, what he calls the really old-time religion on this planet. Within shamanic cultures, he writes, there is often a distinction between the path that is oriented towards special powers and the path that is oriented toward ego transcendence. The path of powers brings knowledge of the spirits, but ego transcendence brings knowledge of the Great Spirit. As is often the case, I'm interested in secret third options, which exist right at the point between seemingly opposite choices. I try to orient to this realm of powers by taking it seriously and holding it lightly. Is there a way to both have knowledge of the spirits, not just transcend, but integrate the egoic self, and on our way to knowledge of the Great Spirit, use our powers for good? That's what I'm interested in. And these are the questions that were sparked while listening to the Odd Couple podcast pairing I mentioned earlier. On American Alchemy, Jordan Jozak talked about being part of the GATE program and eventually taken into a psionic testing program. Journalist Ross Coulthart has reported on military whistleblowers and veterans claiming the U.S. government uses human psionic assets, individuals with psychic or telepathic abilities, to locate, communicate with, or summon UAPs during crash retrieval and field operations. More recently, Coulthart claims these assets have lured in UAPs, which have been shot down and retrieved, presumably to try to reverse engineer their technology. I know many experiencers felt in their bones whistleblower Jacob Barber's description of the spiritual and emotional experience he had interacting with a UAP, which he described as feminine, loving, and maternal, and which was captured. For the record, we all know the realm of disclosure is so full of twists and turns and 7 false things and 3 true things that I can't and don't know the capital T truth here. But even though it sounds like a plot to a sci-fi movie, I've heard enough personal accounts from people I know and trust to believe that these programs exist and that there are factions using assets to call in craft. I've had my own experiences with CE5 or HICE, human-initiated contact experience, and I know it's possible. Listening to Jordan describe the events in the testing program, I was struck with what he said about how much of his training involved techniques to bypass logical barriers and reach a deeper level, where he could perceive the universe as dynamic rather than fixed. This involved the use of binaural beats, relaxation exercises, and most striking to me, working with subconscious beliefs around his ability to remain open to the possibility that what was being asked of him was actually achievable, namely remote viewing, telepathy, and influencing random event generators. Interestingly, Jordan emphasizes that an open heart and heart-centered consciousness are essential for interacting with non-human intelligence. We could say his natural ability to go into the realm of power was trained, amplified, and co-opted by this program. What I find amazing, hilarious, disturbing, and sad is that it seems these factions know the heart is involved. They know that certain people have access to psi abilities like remote viewing and telepathy, and also seem to know that these abilities can be further developed with training. Wilder still, it seems clear that they know there is something about the open heart and heart-centered consciousness which allows people to have these abilities. And yet, rather than develop their own abilities, their own open hearts, they co-opt the power of those who do have the abilities. Maybe because coming from heart-centered consciousness wouldn't align with the exploitation of the assets and the overall exploitative goals of the program. I find it ironic, to say the least. In Buddha at the Gas Pump, Keith Parker talks about his awakening journey and how he was intentional and disciplined about developing himself spiritually. He said that when the heart center, according to him, associated with the astral domain, opened, he began having experiences of energetic beings, nonverbal communication, and encounters with what he describes generally as weird stuff. I relate. He frames this as a challenging but natural phase of opening where the, quote, frequency fences that usually limit our perception begin to dissolve. He reports these experiences lasted a few years and then seemed to diminish and integrate. He talks about shadow work specifically as a necessary process of integration that occurs when the deeper levels of the human energy field open, particularly when what he calls the astral domain, what Jung calls the realm of power, and what I call the sacred interior becomes accessible. This includes working with personal history and content, inner child work, and relational work in order to clear any obscurations embedded in the structural layers of the subtle body, what he refers to as the aura. So, all of this got me thinking about spiritual work and development and how directly they are related to phenomenal and extraordinary experience. Why, when I started to make sense of my own experiences, I was drawn into spiritual practice, parts work, shadow work, and what started with UFOs ended with and continues with me feeling my feelings. Going deep into shadow and constructs, unconscious and subconscious material with the aim of integration, wholeness, and liberation, so that there is access to more power, clarity, and wisdom, to attempt to not only do more good in the world, but also have the ability to know what that good might be. And the open heart shines at the center of it all. The open heart, often broken open, has an intelligence which sees beyond personal bias and preference, beyond wounds, fears, beyond our shame and smallness. The open heart is the portal which reveals worlds to us and has deep intelligence that links us to every other human and being in this realm and beyond. It is our ethical compass and teaches us that we are all one and that harming another is really harming ourselves. The intelligence of the open heart guides us beyond the defended self into spiritual realms and ultimately to our true nature. It's obvious that humans can gain access to psi abilities, to these powers and cities. What we do with them depends on the meaning-making we have around them and on our own guiding ethics. My teacher is fond of saying, anyone can have a waking up experience, but without growing up and cleaning up, we can turn into Darth Vader. Shinzen Young talks about his teacher at a Buddhist temple in Taiwan. He was, according to Young, a tantric wizard whose primary interest was of acquiring psychic powers, but that interest had developed after his enlightenment. He cultivated these powers because that was his way of helping people. He wasn't interested in the powers themselves as the end goal, but as part of a collection of tools he could draw on to be of service in the world. I get really curious about the why of all of this. Why should we try to develop these abilities? And if we do develop them, or if we already have them, as many people do, what should we do with them? I often use the example of spoon bending, of all things. It's a silly little psi ability, but very fun and social. When I first learned to do it, shout out to my editor, Susan Chancellor, and her husband, Jack, who taught me, I wanted to bend every spoon in the world. I went to thrift stores and found the strongest spoons I could and took them home and bent them all. I learned to tie them nearly into knots. It was amazing, and it remains amazing. But I've noticed something. The more I did it, the more I had the sense that I was using up some karmic reserve that would take effort to build up again. It also seemed to start to take a small toll on my body. I don't know how else to describe it. I shared this feeling with some friends and they resonated. They'd noticed exhaustion, nausea, and some odd and even dark vibes after doing it for a while. My own meaning making inspired me to choose to do it only if it would help someone realize that reality wasn't as solid and predictable as they thought. That seemed like a worthy use of the ability and aligned with my ethics. The point wasn't to bend spoons. Who cares about that really? It's cool and fun, but what's the bigger why? None of this is prescriptive, and I'm not really into shoulds. Bend spoons for fun if you want to. I don't think the way it came through for me means anything necessarily that would apply to the broad collective. That said, I do think the reasons behind things matter. That shadow work and motivations and ethics matter so that we can use our incredible human potential and abilities to be of service to a world that needs a lot of earth lovers at the moment. And it also seems that exploring the subconscious content in the mind, beliefs and shadows and motivations, not only prevents harm, but can actually grant access to those abilities in the first place, or help to hone them. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but for a few months I've been feeling a really distinct background frequency change. Is it the CERN shutdown at the end of June, all the nearly unprecedented astrological placements, something in me and my close people's personal evolution? Has some sort of tipping point of collective consciousness been reached? Something else? Nothing at all of the above? I don't know. But I've noticed that there seems lately to be a lifting of a kind of dampener of possibility, a certain energy of heaviness, something I couldn't have begun to describe or even know was there before it lifted. Things feel more accessible, human nature and potential more obvious. Change seems easier to put in place and undertake. Psi abilities, Siddhis, access to the intelligence of the heart, feel at our fingertips. And beyond psi abilities and Siddhis, this heart intelligence is what feels most important. Some of the most spiritually mature people I know have no psi abilities at all. The open heart itself becomes a power greater than any single ability. It is a necessary guide to who we are capable of becoming and who we already are. The heart is the doorway to multidimensional perception. And we can cultivate it, discover it, liberate it, amplify it. We can look into the underworld of ourselves and find the places that need healing and integration. Find the parts of us who have been exiled and are seeking wholeness. And with that wholeness, it becomes more and more obvious how where we place our attention and the quality of our attention literally shapes our reality and contributes to the shaping of our collective reality. We can do it all from a space of love, ethics, wisdom, and care. For a long time, we have been told a story about humanity that says that we are a cancer on this planet, that everyone would be better off if we weren't here. And I understand that narrative on some level. In our unconsciousness, horrible things are done. But in the revelation of those horrible things is a kind of purification. Not pure as in white, light, clean, high, uncontaminated, but pure as in clarified, as in a heating up and rendering out of ignorance, obstacles, and mistruths, leaving something golden behind. Our true nature, our multidimensional, wildly vital and alive, dark and light in equal dancing measure, powerful, playful, creative, generative, and regenerative selves. I talk a lot about the broken heart, and what I mean by that is the broken open heart, the undefended heart which guides us and nourishes us and introduces us to realms of power we're only beginning to imagine are possible. Power we can wield with ethics and maturity for a broader purpose, and the benefit of not just ourselves, but all beings everywhere. Thanks for joining me on this episode. If you're interested in joining the small group coaching spaces held by myself and Dr. Carrie Murphy, please email me at earthalovestory@gmail.com. Our first coaching container is full, and we have a waiting list for the next one. To learn more about that, or to book a one-on-one session with me, please visit robinlassiter.com.